everyone. Thanks for joining me for some of these shorter videos and emails to help close the loop on some of the open-ended items that were left from our Belly Sparkles and Beyond workshop. I hope that this will help answer some of the questions that I'm sure you must have and help you get more out of your workbooks and the information that we talked about to really be able to cultivate some of those extremely meaningful intentions, put those into practice in your life, and honor your intentions and boundaries for yourself even better than you already hopefully are now. Today, what I wanted to start with is filling in the rest of our values worksheet that I left very open after our workshop. I got home later and I was thinking about it and I was like, I didn't even explain what the other columns were for or what the heck you're supposed to do with the last three, right? So let's go ahead and go through that now so you can feel a little more complete in your worksheet, hopefully, than you do now. And if you have forged ahead and completed this on your own, good on ya. That's great. Whatever you did, I'm sure is perfect and it's working for you and I love it. But in case it helps give a little bit more context and information, I'll explain what all the other columns are and what to do with those last three values on this page over here, as well as what the 4 boxes on the bottom are meant for. So if you recall, the activity we all did together was choosing 7 of these values that really just resonate for you right now. And hopefully you remember too that one of the things I mentioned is that these shift and change dynamically. We tend to think of values as these strong pillars of our character and our personality and the things we stand for, which is true, of course. These are guiding principles that reflect our deeply held beliefs, and they really help us decide whether we're aligning our actions and our intentions and our goals with what's the most important to us. So it makes sense to put a lot of thought into this and to think really, really thoroughly about, are these the ones I want to select? But I just want to assure you on top of that, that these are going to shift and change over time. And the idea that we're coming up with here is really narrowing things down to find what feels the most important right now in terms of where we focus our attention, our energy, and our precious finite resources. So depending on where you're at in your life, depending on what else you've got going on, and what is already taken care of for you in terms of your needs, these are going to look very different than they may have 10 years ago or even 10 days ago. And in a month, they might change for you, and that's okay. It's just being aware of them and making sure you're aligning actions and intentions with them so that everything feels like it's in accordance with what is the most important, the most meaningful, and the most impactful for you right now. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so with that, on our worksheet here, you'll notice there are a bunch of different columns. So if you followed along during the workshop, you have 7 at least values written in the very first column. And what these are, the gray columns are best self, seek out in others, admire or aspire, most needed in the world, and gives belly sparkles. Those are meant to be checkmark columns. So for each value that you have, you'll go through these columns and see, does it check that? And if it does, put a check mark there. If it doesn't, no worries. None of your values have to check any of these boxes, or they could check all of them. There's no right or wrong, and it doesn't mean it's any more or less important per se. But what this will do by filling this out is just give us a good visual that makes it seem a little bit more apparent, perhaps, what our most deeply held values are right now. So the first column is best self. And so what do I mean by that? Well, is this a value that when you are operating as your very best self, you embody? It's part of what makes you feel like you're your best self. When you go out into the world and you're feeling very much authentically you, this value is a part of that, what makes that up. So if that is true for your first value, you would put a check mark under best self. For seek out in others, this is a value that is something you regard as a must have in others, maybe. Maybe you seek it out because something about it complements your own set of values. So it might not even be something that you embody all that much, but it's something that you regard as very important. Or it might be something that you just happen to notice that others who you have a really strong connection with tend to really embody and hold as their own value. So if that's something that you seek out in others, you would put a check mark in that column. Admire or aspire to kind of speaks for itself a little bit, but is this a value that you really admire in others? Maybe it's something you're working to develop or nurture within yourself, or maybe it's something you're already great at. Either way. But if you admire it in other people and aspire to more fully embody that or develop that within yourself, you would put a check mark in that column. Most needed in the world, so the second from the last column over here, that is meant to be, is this a value that you would seek out in leaders and decision makers, like for our country? Is it something that our world really would benefit from having more of those types of people who hold this value for themselves, who embody this value, who walk in this value? Is it something that more people need to possess for the good of the world in your mind, in your opinion, and in your experience? So if it feels like something that's one of the most needed values in the world, you would put a check mark there. And then gives Belly Sparkles, of course, we have to have that column. And for this one, when you think of how it looks and feels to move through your life in a way that honors this value, does that give you belly sparkles? Does that give you that life surge, that deep kind of soul energy to think about when you're imagining yourself walking through your life, honoring that value or embodying that value? If so, then that check mark gets made in that column as well. Like I said, some of your values are going to check several of these columns. Some might check one or two. Some may not check any at all. Maybe you appreciate this value for some reason that isn't listed in these columns. That's perfectly okay. There is no right or wrong. This is just a way to sort of identify which ones feel really important across a variety of different mechanisms for measuring why it's important to you, if that makes sense. And we left those last three blank, right? Now, if those are still blank for you, the whole purpose in that was after we had gone through the quieting meditation where we connected to our hearts, after we went through the soul fuel activity where we listed out our joys, our belly sparkle triggers, and our energy boosters, and after we thought about boundaries and what it looks like to implement our intentions using our values, I just thought it might be nice if we left a few open in case there were some that you might want to adjust along the way, or if after going through all of those activities, which you have now done, you could go back and see what stands out to you the most. Does something else jump out at you than what perhaps you might have chosen originally out of that list of values on page 5 in your workbook? So if you haven't already, go back and add another 3. So yay, you get 10 now instead of 7. That feels a little bit better, right? And see, they might be the same ones you would have picked before we did all of those things, or they might be different now. Either way is great. And once you've done that and you've filled out all the columns for each one, then you can look at it and see, does this sort of vibe with what I feel like are my most deeply held values right now in my life? And if so, can you narrow them down to 4 that feel like your top shelf values right now? And that's what those boxes are for along the bottom here. So this is just a page to help you organize those thoughts, see what's checking more boxes in terms of how you feel about those values, and give it a bit of a sorting to come up with 4 that feel really powerful for you. And those 4 might be something that's worth considering when you're looking to make intentions and when you're setting boundaries, to make sure that you're in alignment with those right now, because you've identified them as being pretty important across a lot of different meanings of that word. So I hope that helps. And that'll be it for today. I'll come back with you soon to touch on some of the other areas that could use a little brush up with some explanation. And we'll continue on in the workbook. All right. Thank you all for your patience and for all of the grace. And thank you for completing the evaluations and for all of your kind comments and reviews. I'm so completely humbled by this experience, and I have appreciated every moment of it. So thank you very much. And I'll look forward to chatting with you soon. Take care.